Welcome to the Darkstream, Voxday, voxday.net, and unauthorized.tv. Thanks for tuning in. Waiting to see if we have good audio, video. Audio and video are good, confirmed by Raging Zoomer. Thank you. And tonight we're going to talk about the invasion and the inevitability of the Numinous. If you're following the blog, then you can probably understand what we're going to talk about here. But it's really quite timely because I was just putting some of the final touches on A Sea of Skulls, the complete edition, and just making sure that everything's in the proper order and all that before it goes out to the first readers. And this morning I got an email from a reader named JC who penned what can only be described as an impressively detailed wall of text concerning his opinion on why George R.R. Martin has been unable to finish A Song of Ice and Fire. And it actually inspired me to make a little meme about it before I posted it with the AI systems. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but if you haven't been to the blog today, I'd highly encourage you to go and check it out, because I think you'll find it's really an intriguing essay, not so much on Martin himself. Martin's just the example, but it is an important philosophic aspect to writing that applies to pretty much any writer, certainly any writer of fiction. And in addition to addressing the topic of Martin and why he has announced that he's not going to finish, I don't know if you're aware of that, but Crazy Days and Nights reported that George Martin has been telling people close to him that he has no intention of ever finishing the series, possibly not even finishing the current book. So anyhow, this is the meme that I put up, which is two angels at the gates of heaven, and George Martin shaking his fist at them and refusing to enter in. And what that represents, of course, is the way in which Martin has simply refused to take the story in the direction that it obviously wants to go. It obviously should go. I was quite certain from very, very early on. I mean, probably after the second book, that eventually, that the culmination of the whole thing would be John marrying Danny to bring the opposing foes together, and then joining forces with the dragons to fight the White Walkers as they begin their invasion and start wreaking havoc across the north. I mean, this is the way the story needed to go. The way the story had to go. It's what everything was shaping up for. But the fundamental problem that Martin has, and just to be clear, when I said on the blog post that the reader who had emailed me, who wrote the piece, when I said that I had agreed with what he was saying all along, I was specifically referring to where the story had to go, where the saga had to end. Because the fundamental problem with epic fantasy is that there are certain rules to sagas. There are certain aspects that you have to respect. And not only that, but there's also literary traditions. You know, if you write a an English language, English literary novel, and it ends in a suicide, readers are going to be very unhappy with you. It's not really a part of the English tradition, with the one exception of if you're turning the character into some sort of Christ figure. It was done quite explicitly in the movie Platoon. Given the way that the character was portrayed at the end, falling down, spreading his arms, etc., etc. But if you're writing in a Japanese style, in a Japanese literary tradition, then it would probably feel almost as jarring if you ended in a wedding. Now, just to be clear, I don't agree with the emailer that this is the reason that Martin can't finish his story and that Martin won't finish his story. Being a middle-aged writer, I am much, much more familiar with what I believe to be the fundamental problem, which is that I think that Martin just aged out. I think that he lost his literary fastball. It's something that happens, and you can't know when it's going to happen, but it's usually sometime around the age of 70. I'd be interested if someone wants to look up how old was Colleen McCullough when she wrote the book Caesar's Women. If someone could look that up and pop it into the chat, I'd appreciate it. Because that was the first time that I became conscious of the way in which authors lose their fastball. I've never read The Thornbirds, although that's the book that she's most famous for because it was turned into a famous miniseries, but I had read her Rome series. It began with First Man in Rome, started off with Marius and Sulla, got into Julius Caesar, etc., etc. And I remember when I was reading The October Horse, I had some bad vibes. It just didn't read quite like the other book. But Caesar's Women, if I recall correctly, was just unreadable. It's possible that I have it backwards. This was, I think this was in college that I read them. But in any case, it doesn't matter which one it is. The point is that the author who was writing the later book was not the author of the former ones. It was the same person, it was the same woman, but for whatever reason, whether it was some level of mental degradation, whether it was lack of focus, lack of literary stamina, and believe me, there's definitely a literary form of stamina, just as there is a physical form of stamina. And as you get older, you just don't have as much. I cannot lift for 3 hours anymore. When I was 21, 22, a good friend of mine and I, we used to go out to the clubs on a Friday night, crash at his apartment downtown. Then we'd get up and we would go to his father's club, and we would just literally work out for approximately 3 hours. I can't even fathom that now. But that's what it took to just get us to the point of complete physical exhaustion. Then we'd hit the saunas, the steam room, jacuzzi, hit the bar and have a drink. We usually had a screwdriver because the orange juice was healthy. It's part of our workout routine. The thing is, we were doing this, you know, pretty much every weekend. And then, of course, as soon as we would finish, then we'd go out to dinner and out to the clubs again. And you can do that when you're young. Just like when you're working on computer games, like we were doing at Fenris Wolf in the Digital Ghetto. We worked a ridiculous number of hours a day. We'd sleep like 5 hours a night, and then just be up and back at it. The only time we really stopped working was to play games. I can imagine doing that for like a weekend now, maybe. But to just do that for months on end, once you hit middle age, you start slowing down. You really, I find that between all the distractions of the various responsibilities and the need to do this, that, and the other thing, it's really hard to buckle down and just get a solid hour of writing in. That's why I have very limited goals now. Just if I can get 1,000 words a day in on something, I will make progress. I will get stuff done and published. But the days of, for me, the days of banging out 5,000 to 7,000 words a day, not happening. Just not happening. It's probably for the best anyhow. The most I ever wrote was 11,000 words in a day, and I junked almost all of it 2 days later because it wasn't very good. Q1882 has done the work, thank you. And he said she was 59 or 60 years old. Okay, so here you have a very successful novelist. She wrote big, epic novels. Granted, they were historical novels. That's probably a little bit easier because you can kind of lean on your research a lot more. But she was born in 1937. The books was published in 1996. So she was about 59 years old. And so I would, so think about that. She lost her fastball writing wise when she was 59. Martin's 75 now. So he's, in my opinion, now I could be wrong, maybe next year Martin will, gleefully present both books completely finished, and they'll be excellent, and they'll totally improve upon the ending that was provided by the television show. We can only speak about our perspective and our opinion and what we see. And what I see, and what I have seen for several years now, is a writer who's cooked. I think he's done. I don't think he enjoys it. I don't think he really wants to sit down and bang away at the keyboard anymore. And to be honest, who can blame him? He's had success well beyond his wildest dreams. The story that was told in the TV show was the story, more or less, that he intended to tell. And nobody liked it. Everybody thought it was a terrible ending because it was a terrible ending. It's really kind of fascinating. One of the guys on Social Galactic, I'll have to post this on the blog soon, but one of the guys on Social Galactic went through and demonstrated how a significant amount of the various elements of the characters and story in A Song of Fire and Ice are a inversion of Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. The observation that I thought was most interesting, and I'm not saying that I agree with it, but there might be a point to it, is that Bran is who's possessed by the Ravenheart spirit or whatever, is essentially Sauron. And so what Bran's kingship represents, therefore, is the triumph of Sauron over Middle-earth. I'm not sure about that one, but it's certainly an interesting idea. Some of the other elements are so much more obvious. You know, the Black Riders are inverted to become the White Walkers. I mean, there's no chance that's accidental. None whatsoever. And the Social Galactician had a couple other equally interesting observations. I think there was something like 27 of them in all. It's pretty interesting. But to return to to JC's essay, what he points out, and it's related to these observations of inversion, is that what Martin set out to do was to invert the fantasy saga, to subvert, not just to invert, but to subvert the fantasy saga and prove that his materialistic, amoral, godless anti-heroes were the real heroes, and the conventional fantasy heroes, the individuals that you expected to be the epic champions, the Eddard Stark, to a lesser extent Jon and Dany Targaryen, Jon Snow, that these quasi-heroic figures were stupid and failures, and and that everything about the heroic was fundamentally misguided, fundamentally foolish. Because God is dead and man is just a animal wandering around a meaningless meat park, good for nothing more than to pursue his desires, obsessions, and to assuage his lusts. I mean, that's what his philosophy is. And so, with most authors, especially fiction authors, not all of them, but with most of them, you can actually glean a pretty accurate perspective of their core philosophy and aspects of their core beliefs from reading their fiction, from the stories that they choose to tell, from the characters that they choose to lionize, to the voice that they use to express their characters' thoughts and words. Now, some authors are better at disguising this than others. John Scalzi is the absolute worst. He's the complete extreme. Every single character speaks with his voice. That snarky, superior voice. Because Scalzi's a mediocre writer. Martin's a better writer than Scalzi, so he's able to at least give a moderately coherent voice to those characters who signify or possess beliefs that he doesn't share, that he doesn't have. But like most irreligious men, like most irreligious authors, he's totally incapable of genuinely writing a true religious figure. He just can't bring himself to do it. He tried a little bit, but he couldn't resist the need to subvert it. And that is, as the essayist asserts, that's Martin's fatal weakness. Because in his need to subvert the heroes and to subvert the saga, he ended up writing something where the story of John and Danny, who are, as I said, the logical heroes of the story, he created a pathway that, in order to finish it properly, he needed to turn them into proper heroes, the very thing he was seeking to avoid from the start. And it's that need to subvert that is Martin's biggest weakness, because he did it so successfully with Ned Stark, especially in the context of television. I mean, it was very, very successful in the book as well. But the problem when you need to subvert, or when you have a desire to shock, is you get one chance. You can do it one time. Now, of those of you who have read the books, tell me, how many of you were genuinely shocked by the Red Wedding? How many of you were surprised at all when the young wolf marrying the peasant girl didn't go well when he put himself in the power of the lord with that controlled the straits? It's been a long time since I've read the book, so I'm not necessarily clear on the names of the lesser characters. Coyote Jack says, not surprised it was heavily telegraphed. It was. I mean, I would almost go to the point to say not just that it was heavily telegraphed or even clumsily telegraphed. I felt like it was forced. And what I mean by that is, here we've got a very successful young general. He is in the middle of a civil war. He's coming into his own, and we're supposed to believe that he just throws it all aside for love. Now, coming from any author, it would be hard to buy into. I didn't buy into it at the time. As I'm reading this, I'm reading this and I'm thinking, wait, what? How did this happen? How did anyone permit this to happen? Yeah, there's no possibility of this. Because remember, we're not talking about somebody who is a very powerful leader who has complete control over his vassals. I mean, this is a young guy who has to hang on to his vassals, who has to be advised by them, and he's just going to go off and do that on his own, and they're just going to accept it. It's just not credible. And so, of course, it's not credible in any author, but particularly not in the author who shocked everybody by killing off the hero Ned Stark. Right? And so that's why it became so obvious. Coyote Jack says, the books quickly became a race to worst case scenarios, from bad decisions to subvert expectations. Yeah, here's the thing. If you subvert an expectation once, that's fine. If you do it twice, then it becomes not only predictable, but anticipated. I mean, think about this. And this is why it sometimes amuses me when, to tell people that I'm a better writer than George R.R. Martin. And here's why. So for those of you who have read both A Throne of Bones and A Song of Ice and Fire. There's a scene in both books where a character that you believed, that you were supposed to believe, that the author intended you to believe was dead, who turned out not to be dead. Now, how many of you believed it in the case of A Song of Ice and Fire, with regards, of course, to Jon Snow? And without naming any names or characters, how many of you believed it in the scene in A Throne of Bones? You know, it was vastly amusing to me to get emails from people when that book came out saying, I think you made a mistake. I would just email them back and say, read it again. Read it again. Yeah, I'm not talking about Catelyn Stark to Lady Stoneheart. We're not talking about that. We're talking about when, shock, horror, Jon Snow is dead. How many of you were surprised when he was promptly brought back to life? You know. Colin Crutz says, Jon Snow's revival was so lame. It was so bad that it was openly mocked on Saturday Night Live. And so you see, there's the problem when you try to play the subvert expectations game. You know? And if it's correct that George R.R. Martin's goal was to subvert the fantasy novel, then he absolutely failed, because as with the divine invasion of our fallen world, the numinous, the spiritual, the good, the beautiful, and the true have this way of sneaking in on you. This is why fallen man is able to repent. This is why even the worst of us, even those who devote themselves to evil, to hedonism, to materialism, sometimes find the still small voice gently pushing them back toward the good, the beautiful, and the true. I mean, honestly, I think that thesis is almost too beautiful to be true. You know, if it was Martin's attempt to subvert the good, the beautiful, and the true is genuine, and it was itself subverted by his own need and his own skill at storytelling, I mean, that's just beautiful irony and a cosmic joke. I'm not saying I buy it. I am saying that I would like to be able to do so. You know, I have to admit, George R.R. Martin does not like me at all. Yes, he has made several comments in that regard. But if I was to interview him, you know, I would absolutely love to find out, to talk with him about why he was unable to finish the story, why he was avoiding the obvious path to the heroic and or tragic ending. I mean, he could have made it a tragic ending. You know, Jon and Dany could have died together stopping the White Walkers. But, you know, apparently not. It is interesting too. I did see a bit of his subversive hand at work in the the way that the White Walkers managed to kill the one dragon, and it made me laugh when I saw it, just because uh, uh, I've written some stuff. It's unpublished. I don't know that I'll ever publish it because I'm not sure how well it fits, but it's set in the world of Selenoth long after the events of A Throne of Bones, A Sea of Skulls, and so forth. And uh, it involves, the use of dragons and stuff in warfare. And of course, you know, the um, the anti-dragon catapults were something that I had written. This is like 15 years ago or so. I mean, it's obvious. I'm not saying it's I'm not saying it's anything special. Um, but it was interesting how, after demonstrating the awesome power of the dragons, and you think, well, this will be easy. Just breathe flame at the White Walkers and wipe them out, and then boom, the the um, the king, whatever his name is, of the White Walkers, ends up just taking them down. So that was but the problem is, again, if you do it too many times, it becomes too obvious. And instead of being a fascinating surprise that brings you deeper into the book, it just makes you laugh. Lucky shot. It's 1,000,001 shot that they hit every time. If Jon Snow didn't survive, George R. R. Martin wouldn't have been able to have his incest storyline. He couldn't resist that temptation. I mean, frankly, I'm just a little bit surprised that before the incest storyline, he didn't have him rape her or something. You know, I mean, how on earth did he pass that one up? You know, I mean, there's a reason why I refer to him as George Rape Martin. The number of described, referred to, and implied rapes work out to one every 17 pages in the books published so far. You know, um, and more than a few of them are, uh, in this sort of tee-hee, isn't that so funny way, especially with the one girl who gets caught outside by the soldiers and stuff. It's just, um, or the boys will be boys thing with Tyrion and his brother. So, to a certain extent, uh, that opening scene, which is pretty intense in A Sea of Skulls, is in some ways a response to that attitude. You know, um, because the thing is, we're all influenced by the writers we've read. Everyone who writes fantasy is influenced by Tolkien. You know, I'm actually, believe it or not, less influenced by Tolkien. I'm more influenced by Susan Cooper, Roger Zelazny, um, and to a certain extent Martin, just because reading Martin's books is what inspired me to write A Throne of Bones. Because when I read his stuff, I thought, I think I can write a better story than this. We'll see. You know, I mean, we'll find out within a month. We'll find out what people think of A Sea of Skulls, and I'm already working on the next book, which will bring that particular series to a close. But anyhow, I do think it's fascinating to see the way that the spiritual has a way of creeping in, and the way that the good, the beautiful, and the true has a way of subverting those who would destroy it eventually, over time. You know, I mean, to me, it kind of reminds me of the way that a weed will somehow find its way up, you know, even after the street's been paved and they've, you know, laid down the asphalt, you know, layers of rock and dirt, and yet nature's going to find a way through. You know, you can try to enforce your, you know, wicked philosophies and your materialist perspectives all you want, but the Numinous has a way of forcing its way in areas and places that you didn't expect. And that's one of the things that's fascinating about reading books like these, is seeing how these things happen. So anyhow, that's all I have for tonight. So thank you for tuning in. I'll look forward to seeing you at the next one. I'm Vox Day, and this is the Darkstream.